Thank you for viewing this recorded presentation that details how the Possible Selves theory lays the foundation for the Empower Your Future initiative. My name is Diana DePaulis, and I am the Empower Your Future Program Manager at Commonwealth Corporation. In this presentation, you will get a brief overview of the following topics. What is the Possible Selves theory? Overview of Possible Selves programs, the EYF Model, Massachusetts Career Development Benchmarks, Possible Self elements, connections to positive youth development, Possible Selves in EYF and in the classroom, and connections to discharge planning. For additional information and resources about the Possible Selves theory and how to implement it in classrooms, please use the book Possible Selves, Nurturing Student Motivation that is available to all EYF teachers. You may contact Diana DePaulis or Barbara Bridger for copies of the book. Our first topic is what is the Possible Selves theory? The following quote comes from Marcus Aurelius, who coined the term Possible Selves and developed the theory. Possible selves are the ideal selves that we would very much like to become. They are also the selves that we would become and are afraid of becoming. The possible selves that are hoped for might include the successful self, the creative self, the rich self, the thin self, or the loved and admired self. Whereas the dreaded possible selves could be the alone self, the depressed self, the incompetent self, the alcoholic self, the unemployed self, or the bag lady self. It is important to remember that the Possible Selves theory should be a motivating thought process for students and a tool to emphasize the need to grow and each individual's ability to grow and change. Possible selves are not meant to be a judgment about where a person is in their life now, nor are they meant to be used as a comparison to other people. Possible selves should be used as an opportunity to reflect about oneself and set goals for growth. Teachers and staff should remember that some students may have family members or friends who represent a feared possible self or who struggle to become a positive possible self. Students themselves may also currently be struggling to envision and become a positive possible self. It is important for teachers to not disparage a person who is living as a feared possible self, but to encourage students to see that growth is possible and that setting goals is important. As you heard in the quote, a possible self is the idea that an individual has about what he or she may become in the future. Marcus Aurelius identified that having a clear and positive idea about one's future can be very motivating. They also acknowledge that for some people, it is motivating to imagine a negative self and then work hard to avoid that future self. It is the goal of the Possible Selves theory and the EYF curriculum to ensure that students are envisioning positive possible selves and are empowered with the tools and resources they need to become those possible selves. Schools and programs that utilize the Possible Selves theory are designed to increase student motivation by having students examine their future and think about goals that are important to them. By relating classroom instruction to students' goals for the future, which includes academic, personal, and professional goals, the learning becomes more meaningful to students and more engaging. It is important to not only have students visualize their hoped-for possible selves, expected possible selves, and feared possible selves, but also to have them create plans and action steps that will help them work toward their goals. Later in this presentation, I will review how the Possible Selves theory connects with the EYF curriculum in each program type across the DYS continuum of care. Before I identify the possible self elements and the EYF curriculum, let's review the EYF model on how the Possible Selves theory works alongside the Massachusetts Career Development Benchmarks. EYF curriculum aligns with these benchmarks by emphasizing academic and technical competencies, workplace readiness competencies, and personal and social competencies. The goal of the EYF curriculum is to have students work on these competencies, identify and work toward a positive possible self, and become proactive, resilient, and adaptive as they transition back to work or school. There are many activities and skills that align with the expectations of the Massachusetts Career Development Benchmarks. For academic and technical competencies, examples include math and language skills, training on specific equipment, and executive functioning skills, such as time management and organization. For workplace readiness competencies, examples include resume and cover letter writing, interviewing, social media presence, labor market information, and office and worksite etiquette. For personal and social competencies, examples include communication, compromise, responsibility, determination, working positively in diverse settings, ethics, and positive identity formation. The EYF curriculum uses 8 possible self elements as its foundation. The 8 elements are life skills, create effective goals, believe in yourself, get along with others, learning how to learn, explore and pursue your interest, develop your character, and know yourself. Please pause this screen or see the introduction of any of the EYF teacher manuals to review the definitions. Along with aligning with the career development benchmarks, the EYF curriculum also incorporates positive youth development protective factors. Positive youth development is an approach to working with and educating youth that integrates multiple areas of growth through strategic relationship building that supports a student's development and education. It is important to keep in mind the PYD and CRP elements as supportive resources. PYD allows educators to identify students' needs and strengths, differentiate instruction for a diverse group, including students with specialized learning needs, by using specific instructional strategies, and allows educators to target the knowledge and skills students need to attain their goals. Should you want more information about the elements of PYD and CRP, a PDF guide is available on the EYF site and in the EYF 2016 resources folder. Please go to the Memos and Updates subfolder to find the PDF guide. In order for students to work toward their possible future selves, they need strategies and tools to help them cope with obstacles. Teachers can help youth build protective factors that can strengthen and increase their ability to handle negative influences and events in their lives in productive ways. These factors include belief in youth's own abilities, stable sense of identity, connections with others, and sense of control over future outcomes in their own lives. On the slide, you see a crosswalk between Possible Selves elements in the EYF curriculum and PYD protective factors. The Possible Selves elements are in bold. You can see that these elements often connect with more than one PYD protective factor. Pause the video now if you need more time to review this crosswalk. Now we will review how the Possible Selves elements align with the EYF curriculum across the continuum of care. If you need to review how EYF is structured in each program type and how it connects to discharge and treatment planning throughout the continuum of care, please go to the Professional Development Materials folder and the EYF Resources 2016 folder that can be found on both the EYF Google site and in your Google Drive. In detention, the EYF curriculum emphasizes the Possible Selves elements, life skills, and develop your character. Students will focus on returning to school or work, preparing for jobs and financial decisions, and developing a positive self-image and healthy body. In assessment, the EYF curriculum emphasizes create effective goals and explore and pursue your interests. Students will take self-assessments and identify their personal and professional interests and values. They will also identify which type of high school credential best aligns with their goals and needs. In treatment, the EYF curriculum emphasizes explore and pursue your interest, create effective goals, and know yourself. Students will take self-assessments that allow them to identify careers aligned with their needs, interests, and goals. Students will complete their own Possible Selves tree and identify short-term, long-term, and transitional goals and action plans. When students return to the community, they can participate in Bridging the Opportunities Gap (BOG) programs that reinforce EYF themes and students' goals and action plans. As students participate in subsidized employment or vocational training, they will focus on the Possible Self element, explore and pursue your interests. If students are revocated, they will focus on the Possible Self elements, create effective goals, and develop your character. Students will work on individualized goals and plan to return to school or work. The suggestions on this slide address how teachers can emphasize Possible Selves elements in the classroom. They are recommendations only and are not required, but they are highly encouraged best practices. The suggestions are also not an exhaustive list, so teachers should consider other ways to emphasize the elements in ways that best suit their students' needs. Number 1, teachers can use terminology about possible selves theory consistently and frequently. Teachers can utilize possible self elements when leading class discussions and include the terminology in projects and during activities. Number 2, teachers can name the PYD and possible self elements that students are using or currently working on. Number 3, teachers can have students acknowledge the skills they are developing and how or when they can be used in professional, academic, and social settings. And lastly, teachers can bring possible selves elements out from the background and make an explicit part of activities, objectives, and KUDs. Teachers can also connect the possible selves elements to resume and cover letters by encouraging students to use PYD and possible selves theory terminology, and by helping students include examples of when and how they developed or demonstrated these skills and elements. Teachers can also work with students to create posters about possible selves elements to hang in the classroom. Can also work with students to create a rubric to evaluate their progress in demonstrating elements and skills. Can have youth set specific goals aligned with possible selves elements, and also expand curriculum to include additional projects that help students develop these elements. It is important to connect possible selves elements to work happening outside of the classroom as well. Teachers can support discharge planning meetings and discussions happening between staff and students by preparing youth to use possible selves terminology in meetings, preparing youth to discuss their possible self hopes, fears, and dreams, and by contacting staff attending upcoming meetings to provide suggestions for possible self elements to discuss. Teachers can also consider sharing this video with clinical and program staff and discuss opportunities to collaborate and reinforce application of possible selves theory. Clinical and program staff can emphasize the importance of the possible selves theory during their work with youth by asking questions about possible selves elements, using terminology consistently and frequently, emphasizing students' positive development, and using possible selves theory to motivate students to attain their goals. Thank you for viewing this presentation. Please contact me at ddepaulus@comcorp.org if you have any questions. Please use comcorp@collaborative.org for sharing or requesting access to Google Files and folders.